She's one of the last people still alive with a deeply personal family connection to that weekend in Dallas 50 years ago. Marina Oswald Porter, a woman who now simply wants to be left alone.
After 50 years of being harassed like that and having reporters show up at your home and anywhere you go, and everyone's trying to only speak about one subject and one subject only.
Filmmaker Kia Morgan, a friend of Marina Oswald Porter's, says in recent years she's become reclusive. She lives in a house behind these trees outside Dallas, signs clearly indicating visitors aren't welcome. She married Kenneth Porter 2 years after Kennedy's assassination and raised the son she had with him, along with her 2 daughters with Lee Harvey Oswald.
I understand they've grown up to be quite outstanding citizens, holding good jobs. So I commend her and her children and her husband for what they've done.
A friend says in recent years she turned down a network offer of $3 million for an interview. But decades ago she did speak out, revealing a change of heart about her husband. To TV station KRLD just 2 months after the assassination.
Do you believe that your husband killed President Kennedy?
I don't want to believe, but I have too much facts, and facts tell me that Lee shot Kennedy.
But later she came to believe Oswald was set up, as she told NBC News in 1993.
The swarm of reporters and researchers and conspiracy theorists who descended on the National Archives were looking for answers or proof. They got a lot of pages and more questions. There were no explanations of motorcade routes or motives. There was plenty of evidence that the CIA had investigated the assassination, but no clue to what the CIA knew before President Kennedy was shot. Lots of stuff on Lee Harvey Oswald, his days in the Soviet Union, Mexico, his library books, and dry cleaning tags, and his mental state. But no answer to the big question, why? There still are 10,000 pages of documents that have not been released. Some of them will never be made public. So, conspiracy theories are intact, questions do remain, and people don't believe. Among those who don't believe are Mrs. Kenneth Porter, the former wife of Lee Harvey Oswald, and Larry Howard of the JFK Assassination Information Center, which is an independent research organization, and they join us tonight from Dallas. Mrs. Porter, I want to begin with you. Let me ask you, first of all, when you say that Lee Harvey Oswald, in your judgment now, was innocent, what does that mean? Do you believe that he did not pull the trigger, that he did not fire the fatal shots?
Well, he definitely did not fire the shots according to all the evidence that I have right now. But even if you don't have the evidence, at the beginning, like in 1963, you cannot come to the conclusion that he is a guilty party because he never had been brought to trial by legal means and had been accused by the media, and already premeditated statements have been about his guilt were made public, and now it's so much emphasis on Lee Harvey Oswald, so all the attention mostly concentrated on him or me as some kind of attraction.
Well, let me ask.
And so they that take the light of the actual what do you call it, killers, or what really happened in 1963. Sure.
Let me ask you about the evidence, first of all. First of all, a whole range of ballistic tests have shown that the bullets did in fact come from his gun. You took a picture of him with that very rifle. His palm prints and fingerprints were all over the school book depository.
Would you please repeat the question? Let's start with question number 1. Statement of use number 1.
All right. The first question that I have for you is that all kinds of ballistic tests show that the bullets in fact came from that rifle. That was his rifle. You took a picture of him with it. His palm prints and fingerprints were all over the school book depository.
You have been misinformed.
Well,
you have been misinformed. The ballistic test did not prove anything at all. Nobody showed me any ballistic test with the proof.
Have you, Mrs. There is a new book out. Yes, Mrs. Porter, there is a new book.
Oh, forget about this book. It's like a wallpaper in a room full of termites.
Have you read it?
Just can cover up. No, but I've seen some pieces over there. It's ridiculous.
But this is a man...
If you can snap this an American public, you don't think very much about American people.
Well, but the fact is that,
Okay.
Mr. Porter, this is a man that you're maligning, a man who is a well-known independent lawyer who has a strong record of independent research, who went back through all of the evidence very carefully, and even people who have been skeptical about the original findings.
That's what he told you. That's what he paid to do, to start at the 30th anniversary, simply convince people that the Warren Commission from the day one was right. And there's plenty evidence to prove absolutely different.
Yeah,
but nobody roll up the sleeves and dig in those evidence because it's inconvenient.
Let me ask you about, at the time of the assassination, you acknowledged that Lee Harvey Oswald was a man who had been abusive to you. You have
That's
said
right.
recently that you did not love him in any way.
I never said I did not love him.
Did you love
I
him?
said, of course I did.
Why are you so eager now to protect his memory when at the time you agreed that very likely he was the assassin?
I agree. I said Lee was guilty only after the Warren Commission asked me that question. Shortly after, and they said, on the basis that all evidence is presented in front of you, and the evidence were presented in front of me, mostly my testimony, and some kind of rifle in front of me, which I identify as Lee, but I'm not expert on it, then lots of questions, my answers have been interpreted through the interpreted back. So I have been accused of giving wrong testimony or inconsistency, for which I do not know if I'm responsible or not, because it doesn't sound like the answers that I gave were entirely my answers, but that's beside the point. Yes, I did believe in government of this country and law, and I assume blindly that what I have been told must be correct.
But the fact is that there have been a number of independent investigations now by independent journalists and by independent authors, and they also have come to the conclusion. They have come to the conclusion.
Not they come to the conclusion. Only one chosen by the government right now, or by whoever who wants to prove that Warren Commission was right. And I'm not here to argue over rights or wrong of Mr. Posner's book, because I'm not wishing to publicize this book.
But the fact is, who would you trust to make the final judgment? It seems to me that you are unwilling to accept any of the facts that have been presented so far.
I am.
Let me stop.
I am the harshest judge of Lee Harvey Oswald, because I don't want to go to bed with one even technicality that is to make him free.
Mr. Howard?
If I have a choice to be a wife of assassin and to really know what actually happened into this country and what one assassination after another leading to it, I'd much rather be a wife of assassin than to be lied to.
Than to believe
or to be lied to American people.
Mr. Howard? Well, let me ask you a question. You've become
let me talk to you. When you get your facts straight, then I think you ought to do the interview. Until you get them straight, I don't think we ought to sit there and listen to you. Mr. Posner, who did the book, was up here for 2 weeks in my center. I offered him my phones, my archives. Right. The man's not very bright. He never asked me one question. So when you get your facts straight, we'll continue with the interview.
Mr. Howard, you can take your earpiece out. I think that shows you how eager you are to pursue the truth, because the fact is that Mr. Posner has a meticulous record of examination and investigation. He investigated the Mengele case.
I'll stand my ground and I'll argue with you, okay? If you call somebody, call on the television, on telephone, and tell you that they're going to write the book, and they ask you questions, and I give everybody a fair chance. Yeah. It's better than write the book without. Better write the book with asking me questions. So he asked about the character, what I think about Ruth Paine, and this and that. I don't call that investigation.
But he went well beyond you, Mrs. Porter. Yes, I'm still here. But he went well beyond you. He went back and re-indexed all of the evidence that was available to the Warren Commission. He did independent interviews with other people. He engaged scientific analysis. He engaged scientific analysis.
I'm not going to argue with you because it's your country too, and you should be concerned about what's happening. So let's do it nicely and politely, okay?
Yes, I'm willing to do that. What I'm troubled by, I guess, is that I fail to see factual evidence on the other side. I've seen a number of conspiracy theories. I've seen a number of conspiracy theories over the years that have been put forward or posited, and
Okay.
almost all of them have been knocked down, including the grassy knoll.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go have an open symposium with all the facts presented to the public. It will be just wonderful. And invite Mr. What's his name? Posner on it. That will be fine. I read one thing in the USA or whatever, where he's promoting his book. And he described in the Zapruder film everything backwards, how everything splashed forward. And this is not so. When commission conclusions came only from the few shots not even shown entirely Zapruder film. What kind of investigation is that?
Well, but that was just the beginning of the investigation, and now there have been...
Okay, then let's come another one. I know how I have been used. I know people who betrayed me and this and that. I live in this country for 30 years. I did not come to this conclusion for the sheer convenience of me, because it's not. I'm willing to pay my price, but with all this doing, America paying a price for it too.
I'm sorry I'm sorry that Mr. Howard left there, because one of the things that I wanted to ask was whether or not you have been befriended by a lot of these people who continue to believe that there was a conspiracy.
I also was befriended by people from the government who betrayed me and lied to me.
Do you think
and I'm open-minded. People in the research center, people who write pro-conspiracy book, they're not accurate. They have to protect their ego. They tell lies about this and this and that. And I'll be the last person who will believe all this.
Is there ever a day, Mrs. Porter?
Okay, show me.
Is there ever a day when it goes out of your mind? Is there ever a day when you can set this aside, that terrible event of 1963?
If that was true, I would be ready to accept it right now. But when I hear lies from television, I don't think it's fair for American people to be hearing all that. And I would like to take opportunity to ask Mr. Clinton, our president, to have a pardon for Lee Harvey Oswald for the crime that he did not commit. And that can be proven in a court of law very easily, but I'm not permitted to go there.
Mrs. Porter, thank you for all of your candor, and I know that this for
no, it will go away for you. It doesn't go away for you either. What else do you need?
That's true.
I welcome this kind of examination.
You are free to do as we tell you. You are free to do as we tell you.
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
That's why I don't read the newspaper. I'm a man. I'm 40.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
I began by telling the president that there was a cancer growing on the presidency.
As of now, I am in control here in the White House.
This is crack cocaine from the White House. It could easily have been heroin or PCP. It's as innocent looking as candy.
Good evening. This is Mae Brussel in Carmel, California.
Anybody who's not willing to change based on what they learned is ignorant.
Coffee's for closers only.
I think we've given you enough.
On to Chicago and let's win there.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
This is the Midnight Rider News Show with S.T. Patrick.
Hi, this is Dr. John Miller. You're listening to the Midnight Rider News Show with S.T. Patrick.
Hello, America and the world. Welcome to the Midnight Rider News Show. This is Rob Clark, your friendly neighborhood guest host, traipsing through the trials and travails that have so tempestuously and untruthfully been blasted into your eyes, ears, and minds by the state-sponsored talking heads, court historians, and the textbook conglomerates to control information today. Tonight, we are going to be getting into Marina Oswald. That's right. The alleged lone assassin's Russian bride. But before we do, let me encourage all of you out there to support the efforts of the Garrison Journal. Now, I'm not sure when exactly this will be published. I'm recording it kind of early for ST, but I do know that issue number 2 should be out shortly. Issue number 1, very, very good. And I encourage all of you out there to get it if you have not yet for the small price of $8.99. And follow ST on social media at MWN_ST Patrick on Twitter. You can follow me at The Lone Gunman 7 on Twitter. There you'll find links to many of my shows, which you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, etc. if you like what you hear this evening. Now, in the past, I've done many shows for ST, stepping in to guest hosts, including those about Buell Frazier, David Ferry, General Edwin Walker, Larry Crayford, and Guy Bannister. And tonight will be no different. We're going to be taking a closer look at Marina Oswald. Though much of the opinions about Marina Oswald were formed in the days and months after the assassination by people all over the world as a poor, hapless, grieving young mother who had gotten herself into a bad spot with the wrong guy at the wrong place at the wrong time. Tonight, we're going to take a little bit closer look at all these things that surround the assassination and have an influence or was affected by Marina Oswald. We'll take a closer look at her timeline and her actions, as well as pre-assassination and post-assassination, and get a little bit more into the mindset of Marina and what exactly she was thinking at different times or possibly doing at different times. Many of you out there may not concur with the conclusion that I come up with for you this evening, and that's fine. We can agree to disagree. Tonight is going to be fact-based speculation. That's what I like to call it. Speculation of logical thinking that makes sense based on true facts of the case. And that's about as good as we can do now, some 55 years later. But Marina Oswald is still with us. That's right, folks. Marina Oswald is still with us, still among the living, still out there. And there's hope yet that we come away with something before she passes with some kind of meaningful truth in it. Because, as you know, over the years, she's flip-flopped quite a bit on her beliefs of Oswald's innocence or guilt. Her ideas of certain theories, shall we say, over the years have changed. And, you know, it would just be nice to drop the facade and give us all what we want, and that is just the truth. The plain, hard, ugly, hopefully enlightening truth. So let's start with a little bit of a backstory about Marina Oswald. Born Marina Prusakova. Her father had been killed in the war while she was still an infant. She lived with her stepfather in Archangel in the far north of Russia before moving to Moldova as a small child and then to Leningrad at age 12. In 1955, she entered the Pharmacy Technium for what the Warren Report called special training. She received a diploma in pharmacology in June of 1959 and then was assigned to a job in a warehouse, which she quit after a day. 2 months later, she moved to live with her uncle in Minsk, the capital of Belarus. Her uncle was a colonel in the MVD, the Russian Interior Ministry Security Service. At that time, the agency, which was a mixture of National Police Force and the FBI, carried out several functions, from running large parts of the Gulag to serving as an internal security force. According to the Warren Commission, Colonel Prusakov, her uncle, was head of the local lumber industry, which would have certainly made him part of the Gulag apparatus and therefore part of the security structure. With the rank of colonel, he clearly had substantial responsibilities. According to the Warren Commission, Prusakov had one of the best apartments in a building reserved for MVD employees. She met Lee Harvey Oswald in Minsk, where he worked in an electronics factory after having defected to the Soviet Union in 1959. She was then 19 years old. In Minsk, Marina finally got a job in the pharmacy of a hospital. At the same time, she joined Komsomol, the Communist Youth Organization, a fairly common thing to do, and something that her uncle, given his standing in the government apparatus, certainly would have expected her to do. She had a good many friends when 7 months after moving to Minsk, she was introduced to Lee Harvey Oswald. They had one date at a dance. Immediately after the dance, Oswald was taken ill and checked into a hospital, though not the one where Marina worked. Marina visited him often in the hospital, although they had only met twice prior to his hospitalization. She was able to visit him outside of regular visiting hours, according to the Warren Commission, because of her uniform. Oswald was hospitalized from March 30th until April 11th. It is not clear what illness kept him hospitalized for 2 weeks, but he was cared for at an ear, nose, and throat clinic. He apparently had the mother of all sinus infections. All right. On April 20th, a little more than a month since their first meeting, Oswald proposes to Marina. She accepts, and they are married on April 30th, 10 days later. In the apartment of her uncle. The problem was that in order for Marina to marry Oswald, they needed to get special permission from the state because he was a foreigner. But Oswald wasn't just a foreigner, he was an American defector. And given the Soviet bureaucracy, someone in Moscow was going to have to sign off on this one. And it had to have kicked off one heck of a security review in her uncle's office, but permission, nevertheless, was granted in 10 days. After about a month of marriage, Oswald tells Marina he's tired of the Soviet Union and wants to go home. And they start making arrangements to leave the Soviet Union. At this point, she told the Warren Commission her aunt and uncle became upset and stopped speaking to her. A great deal has been made of the U.S. Embassy's willingness to allow Oswald to return to the United States, but not nearly enough has been made of the fact that the Soviets permitted not only Oswald, but also Marina to leave the country. So as much hullabaloo as we make about how easy it was for Oswald to defect and return to the United States without much fanfare or punishment, it was equally true about how Marina and Oswald were allowed to leave Russia. And it seems things were sped up a lot, and a lot of red tape was cut through, and favors called in or eyes turned blindly as they were allowed to eventually leave the country. On December 25th, 1961, about 6 weeks after applying for departure, she received her exit visa from the Soviet Union, as did Oswald. Marina told the Warren Commission that she was surprised to receive permission. That is an understatement. What happened was unheard of. Although the Warren Commission tried to argue that these things were not uncommon, they just were. Which leads us to the conclusion that the Soviet government wanted Marina and Oswald to marry, and they wanted them to go together back to the United States. It has been alleged that the KGB assigned the agent Marina Nikolaevna Prusakov on Oswald. Her assignment was to find out Oswald's objectives in the Soviet Union and to develop the position for the later relocation in the United States and establishing her position there. The KGB was doing everything to make this happen, including the plan of traveling the U.S. as Oswald's wife. Regardless of Prusakova's cover job in the health sector, she was actually the personnel clerk in the first department of the GRU. Marina was from the family of Soviet Interior Ministry Colonel Prusakov, and she was trained during Seljepin leadership for covert operation in the U.S. or Canada. For her age, she was relatively highly educated, spoke other languages, and following the script written by the KGB, fell quickly in love with an American defector named Lee Harvey Oswald. Now, this may all seem like something out of a grand, crazy spy movie or spy novel of the time, but let's just think for a second how possible this scenario could be. Okay? Now, there was a film released last year, and it was called Red Sparrow. And it was based on a book written by former CIA agent Jason Matthews. And it's based on, of course, true events. How the Russians had these sparrow schools where they would train young boys and girls to use their bodies, the art of seduction, psychology, linguistics, to possibly coerce secrets from certain targets. Now, there are allegations and rumors, and I believe Marina has referred to an incident in her teens when she was possibly arrested for prostitution and kicked out of Leningrad. And these allegations come from her allegedly having a bad interaction with a Hungarian ambassador. This would have put her at a younger age, 16, 17. And, people that knew her back then confirmed this incident. There was a group of them, and eventually, they were kicked out of Leningrad on charges of prostitution. Now, this sounds to me as though it could have been a honeypot situation where the Hungarian ambassador is seduced by a beautiful young woman, given some drinks to loosen the tongue, taken back to the hotel room, and maybe some things got out of hand. We don't know the entire story, but, and might I add, this is allegedly, so I don't get sued here, but it certainly fits in with her timeline and her lineage, being without a father or mother, going to a special school at the age of 12 for a period of 4 years for special training, then sent to live with her uncle, whom she hardly ever met before in her life, who just happened to be an MVD colonel. I mean, it's just odd. Things that make you go, Another thing that'll make you go, like the great group CNC Music Factory told us back in the late 80s, early 90s, is the fact that somehow in this huge country of the Soviet Union, at the height of the Cold War, this one young, beautiful Russian girl happens to meet not just Lee Oswald, an American defector, who she has a relationship with and marries and has children with, but she also managed to meet and have a relationship with another American defector named Robert Webster. And she was also introduced to another American defector whom I cannot find a name for, but I know I read it somewhere, probably in Harvey and Lee. The book's just too big to get down to business, but and find what I'm looking for at the moment. But I do know that she had met Robert Webster. His name and address and phone number were in her address book. And he openly admitted that he met Marina Oswald. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of people, including myself, believe that the reason that Oswald defected to the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War was not because he was enamored by Marxism and communism and was tired of the way of life in the United States and the Marine Corps, but that he was actually sent there as, an early experiment to see if it was possible to get American-speaking, American defectors into Russia and out of Russia and learn what they could find out while there about the Russian way of life, about the Russian infrastructure, how things worked, day-to-day life, things like this. Could they penetrate? Could they stay? Could they come back? Okay, and this would not have been a job for an obvious spy. It would have been a job for a hapless wannabe, and that fits Lee Harvey Oswald just fine. Maybe in the Marine Corps he was showing some symptoms of being interested in Marxism, communism, or the Russian way of life, and was tapped on the shoulder to say, "Hey, buddy, hey, we see that you like these James Bond novels. You like watching My 3 Lives on TV. We hear you practicing the Russian language. We have a top secret mission for you. You're going to be a super secret spy for us, for America, for the good of America. This is what we want you to do," kind of thing. Now, why would we even entertain this idea? Well, here are some things from Jim Marrs' Crossfire about fingerprints of intelligence on Lee Harvey Oswald. He possessed a Minolta Minox spy camera. He had a notebook that included microdots. He loved James Bond books and the spy program I Live 3 Lives. He worked at a top secret Atsugi Air Base in Japan as a radar operator with possible security clearance. This was the base where the CIA's U-2 top-secret high-altitude surveillance program was housed. He was discharged from the Marines and entered Russia through a favorite spy-friendly crossing point in the middle of a false defector program, threatened theoretically to give away U-2 secrets to the Russians in the U.S. Embassy, and returned easily to the U.S. with his Russian wife, who herself had ties to Russian intelligence. All this with financial support in ways that could have only been state-sponsored. He learned Russian in a way which New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison, himself an ex-Marine, concluded could have only been through special training for an intelligence assignment. He also discovered that Oswald's base for his Fair Play for Cuba activities was right in the heart of the New Orleans intelligence establishment, and that he was most probably playing an agent provocateur role, an assertion that I concur with. He grew convinced that his intelligence assets were obstructing his investigation into Oswald's links, something that was confirmed by the HSCA and ARRB releases. Applied while in the Marines to a very obscure Swiss college called Albert Schweitzer that appears to be CIA-linked. And of course, all this is happening, when Gary Powers and the U-2 were shot down. And it just seems a little overwhelming. Others have pointed to those who were convinced that Oswald was a spy, including Marines that Oswald served with, Jerry Hemming, and Oswald's mother. According to Gaten Fonzie, former CIA Director Richard Helms told reporters during recess of the HSCA in 1978 that no one would ever know who or what Lee Harvey Oswald represented. Asked whether the CIA knew of any ties Oswald had with either the KGB or the CIA, Helms paused and with a laugh said, "I don't remember." And here is an interesting quote. This is from an interview of Jim Wilcott and Elsie Wilcott, former husband and wife employees of the Tokyo CIA station where Oswald was stationed. It was common knowledge in the Tokyo CIA station that Oswald worked for the agency. Right after the president was killed, people in the Tokyo station were talking openly about Oswald having gone to Russia for the CIA. Everyone was wondering how the CIA was going to be able to keep the lid on Oswald. I don't know how, but I guess they did. So, that's interesting. Jane Roman, who in 1963 was a senior liaison officer on the counterintelligence staff of the CIA, gave Jefferson Morley and John Newman this revealing answer to the following question during a 75-minute taped interview in 1994. Is this indicative of some sort of operational interest in Oswald's life? Yes, she said. To me, it's indicative of a keen interest in Oswald, held very closely on the need-to-know basis. So, it's just, it goes on and on. Which makes me think of the movie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. If they made a Mr. and Mrs. Oswald movie, a story about two spies who loved each other and got married and had kids, but were really spies for different agencies who ultimately, well, in the movie, of course, they ultimately had to go against each other. It's a very interesting concept. The other question I have is, did Lee Harvey Oswald have any idea, or did he have a feeling, or did he come to believe that Marina Oswald may possibly has been stuck to him by Soviet intelligence to spy on him to come to the United States and basically do what he was doing in Russia and report back to them somehow, like say through the white Russian community that befriended them so nicely? That's an interesting thought. Could that be why Oswald didn't really ever tell Marina much about what he was really doing? It's quite possible. Maybe in his mind, okay, I'm already married to this woman. We have a kid together. We're going to have another kid together. What do I do? What do I do? But all that aside, we know from the letters to the American embassy, or to the Russian embassy, that he was trying to get Marina back to Russia in 1963, first by herself, and then with him to follow at a later date, or then it became them together, all of which wasn't going to happen on any kind of fast track now. Okay, their bed was made, so to speak. And then in pops Ruth Paine, who just happens to be at one of these white Russian parties and who happens to befriend Marina Oswald and Lee Oswald and help them out a lot. Now, over the years, of course, people have accused Ruth Paine of being CIA. Her and her husband, Michael Paine, from the military-industrial complex, Bell Helicopter, so on and so forth. We know Ruth Paine did have ties to the CIA. Her sister and brother-in-law worked for the CIA. They lived in Falls Church, which is right down the street from Langley in Virginia. Is it out of the realm of possibility that someone who knew Russian and who happened to live in Dallas just fit, and with no obvious agency ties, that she fit a particular mold that the agency was looking for to help them out? Maybe they wanted to keep a closer eye on Marina Oswald and not Lee, because they knew what Lee was already up to. They knew he was no threat. They knew he was on our side. They knew he went over there for us. But it's awful damn funny how quickly the Soviets let Marina come to the United States, and how easily. So the inclination was there that maybe she's a spy as well. So quite possibly Ruth Paine could have been assigned to not only keep an eye on the Oswalds, but Marina in particular, and create some kind of a rift. You know, it's very easy when you spend a lot of time with someone to affect their way of thinking and how they view certain situations, and put Marina in a mindset where she'd be better off without this loser who can't hold a job and can't provide for his family. But in the light of the events back then, maybe Lee Oswald was too stubborn to just throw everything away, just to let his wife go, because then he would be seen as a bigger failure. Maybe the American government hadn't lived up to all its promises, you know, and rewarded him accordingly for doing what he did and defecting to Russia, you know, for 2 years. Maybe that's why they threw him a bone in New Orleans, working for Guy Bannister to try and out these commies. Because he wasn't going to work at Riley, even though he told Marina that he was. He was going down, passing out flyers, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, going on the radio, going on TV. He even made a Freudian slip when he was on TV that he was under the protection of the U.S. government when he was in Russia. Okay? I don't know how to make it any clearer for you. Now, he quickly corrected himself, but that is what he said, folks. That's exactly what he said. We see the way that Oswald reacted to FBI agent James Hostey's seemingly harassment of his wife, Marina Oswald. Why do you think the FBI will be trying to talk to Marina Oswald or see what she's doing, and not be worried about her husband, the unloyal American defector to the Soviet Union? Why are they more worried about her than him? Why does it enrage Lee Harvey Oswald so much that he makes a trip to the FBI office in Dallas to speak to Hosty, who happened to not be there, and who he left a threatening note to? Like, hey man, you talk to my wife one more time, that's it, I'm going to blow up this place. Or something to that effect. We don't know because the note was destroyed, for sure. And of course, Hosty doesn't remember exactly what it said. So we're left to speculate. But real quick, back to Marina Oswald and the allegations that she could possibly be a Russian agent here in America. Now, I spoke to you before about her meeting Robert Webster. Okay. Now, he met Marina at an American exhibition held in Moscow during the summer of 1959. They saw each other again in 1960. Curiously, Marina spoke English to Webster, while she only spoke Russian when she came to the United States with Oswald. On one occasion, Marina even confused Webster with Oswald. Webster and Oswald were used to loosen Soviet tongues, and they may have never even realized that. I mean, these guys look so much alike, same build, same description, same facial features, same weight, height, etc., eye color. They were defecting about the same time. They left the Soviet Union about the same time. How does Marina Oswald manage to meet and have a relationship with two American defectors in this giant country of Soviet Union if nothing is funny is going on here? In the 1990s, the Assassination Records Review Board interviewed Joan Hallett, the widow of former naval attaché at the American Embassy in Moscow. Hallett remembered seeing Oswald at the embassy on September 5th, right at the end of the American exhibition. No one could understand the discrepancy between her strong and clear recollection and the September 5th date. Hallett was mistaking Webster for Oswald. This is how much they looked alike. Webster disappeared with a Russian girl named Lena on September 10th, 1959, 6 days after the exhibition ended. Oswald didn't arrive in Moscow until a month later. After Webster was enticed to defect in 1959, he was used as a dangle to find out about Soviet progress in plastics and fiberglass and the impact on the Soviet military and space programs. Robert Webster worked for the Rand Company, and it was very much a plastics and polymers type of guy. And, he had information and knowledge that the Russians may have wanted and that he may have shared with them. But I also believe that if Webster was there and he defected, that he was doing the same program that Oswald was doing. Now, it mentioned there that Webster was in, of course, plastics and polymers. Webster learned during his stay that Soviet plastic technologies on a commercial and application basis are 10 years behind that of the U.S. So, of course, the Russians would have wanted anything he knew. And what he alleges here is that he spoke English with Marina Oswald. Yet, for some reason, Marina Oswald, upon coming to the United States, wouldn't speak anything but Russian. But to Webster, she spoke English. She obviously had to speak some kind of English to Oswald. Or was she pulling the wool over his eyes too? I find it funny that she needs an interpreter when being questioned by the police and the Warren Commission and this and that and the other. But here, in an interview, less than a month after her husband was killed, we hear Marina Oswald speaking perfectly, better than average for a Russian that's been in this country for a year and told not to speak English. So check this out. You tell me if this sounds like somebody who could not speak our language or was familiar with word patterns and verbiage. Here we go.
Marina, what do you do all day? How do you spend your day?
I am busy with my children all day. I try to help to clean house and wash diapers, and little bit cook, play with children outside.
Are you under arrest of any kind?
No, I never done was arrest in the United States and in Russia too.
Are you free to do what you want to do?
Yes, I am free. If I can't, if I want to go to shopping or every place, I can to go.
How about your children, Marina? Are they good children? Do they behave?
Yes, my children very good for me, and I think this is very good children for everybody because Junior and Rachel is very quiet and listening.
How do you speak to the children? In Russian or in English?
I speak with Junior. Many times I speak with Junior in Russian language. But sometimes if I know English words, I speak English.
Junior is 2 years old?
Junior is 2 years old in February.
There you go. I mean, it sounds pretty good to me. She was understanding the questions. She was responding to the questions asked to her. She didn't spend much time thinking about what she was going to say beforehand. I mean, she did pause. But, the way she constructed her responses is indicative to me of someone who's familiar with what she's being asked and what she is replying. Now, sure, it sounds broken a little bit. Of course it will be. I mean, you've heard Marina speak at the, not often, but she was on TV for Hard Copy, I think, in 1990. And then again in 95 with Oprah. And it sounded like she had just gotten off the boat from Russia. For somebody who's been here in this country for 30 or 40 years, You would think the accent would drop off. But she pretty much sounds just like what you heard. Which is either indicative of someone who's still speaking the Russian language on a regular basis, or someone whose English was learned at a time when they were still speaking fluent Russian. Now, after Oswald was killed, she was, of course, put up in the Six Flags Hotel by the Secret Service, and a guy that ran the hotel named James Martin, who ended up being her quote-unquote manager, for lack of a better word, I guess it would be, took it upon himself to draw up a contract with Marina, and which essentially gave him control of what to do with her finances and all these pity checks that were coming in from across the country and across the world to this poor, young, beautiful Russian widow whose husband had just been killed. If any of you have seen the pictures from Lee Harvey Oswald's funeral, she looks like the quintessential grieving widow, when in fact they weren't getting along at the time, if you believe what Marina and Ruth say. Obviously, Lee Harvey Oswald was worth more to her dead than alive, as the donations came pouring in and started reaching in the upwards of the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which translate that to now money, you're looking at the equivalent of millions. Okay? So James Martin took it upon himself to get a financial guy, a lawyer, open bank accounts for Marina in the name of Marina Martin, which is kind of weird, seeing as how he was married already and had kids. But the reason was supposedly, despite all the sympathy that she was getting, no one in Dallas would open this poor woman a savings account and house these hundreds of thousands of dollars that was coming into her in her own name. Okay? I think this guy, James Martin, was bamboozling Marina a little bit, taking advantage of her lack of knowledge of how things work here in America. And they eventually got into a sexual relationship. At some point, James Martin's wife finds out about this. Marina has to go. She can't stay in the house anymore. So she goes and stays with another friend. And according to documents from the Dallas Police Department, they still have Marina under surveillance 2 years after the assassination. And, this is from a document, a DPD report, from an informant that was meeting with and knew Marina, about the money coming in and about her not living with James Martin anymore, and about her still meeting with Robert Oswald, who has been alleged she had a relationship with as well, which of course is, understandable. Things happen when you're consoling, someone who lost a brother, someone who lost a husband. They can commiserate with each other. They can comfort and console each other. One thing leads to another, and the next thing you know, they're humping on the couch. Lee and Robert look somewhat alike. Marina, of course, is, a beautiful woman. I mean, I don't know who Robert was married to at the time, but, you can't blame him. Well, I mean, you can certainly blame him. But being a man back then and being married obviously didn't have the connotations that it does now, or the expectations. So, as Marina admittedly says in a Red Book interview in 1970, she was sleeping around heavily in the years after the assassination, with different folks. She was scared to death that they were going to try to deport her back to Russia. So she ends up marrying an electronics guy named Kenneth Porter, and marrying him, moving in with him. And Kenneth had been married before. He got a divorce. He had had kids. She had had kids. They ended up having a kid together, which cemented her staying here in the United States. And they've been together ever since. So maybe that's true love for you. She never really got far from Dallas. I believe she lived in Richardson, Rockwall, Texas, and still lives in the suburbs around Dallas or close to it, within an hour or two. At various times in her life, she's worked at various jobs. 7-Eleven, where she got fired for being accused of stealing money. She had her husband Kenneth Porter put in jail because he beat the shit out of her, and then later recanted, and he ended up getting out. Things of this nature. And of course, every relationship has its ups and its downs. But Marina has managed to stay here in this country ever since 1962. Almost for 60 years. I'm not even sure if she's even a citizen of this country. She may be by now, but I don't know her official status. But it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility to speculate that the KGB or some other intelligence service in the Soviet Union were training young folks in the art of honeypotting and seduction and spycraft in order to gain secrets. It's not out of the realm of speculation. In fact, it's a fact. There are these Red Sparrow schools or Swallow schools, whatever you want to call them. Can we prove that Marina went there? No. Can we prove that once she got to the so-called pharmacy technicum or whatever it's called, that this wasn't some kind of a cover for specialized training like she would receive at a Sparrow school? I mean, how else do you accommodate for her being able to meet 3 defectors, have relationships with 2 of them, marry and bear children with the 3rd one? In a country as big as Russia, and as many millions of people are there, as many beautiful women are there, she is the one that manages to do this. How? I'll tell you how. She was put into place. That is the only logical explanation. She was put in the right place to try to elicit information from these 2 men. Now, Robert Webster may have not been interested in her. Maybe he found something better, found another girl that he liked better. And then here comes Lee Oswald, who'd probably never been the object of anyone's affection before in his life, whom Marina shows a little bit of interest in and captures Oswald's heart. And perhaps he thought, hey, while I'm here, if I get married, I'll be able to stay here for a while. Then I'll be able to complete my mission. And then when this is all done, I'll just leave her. But then things get complicated when there's a baby. Now you're a father. Now what are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to bring her back. So who's to say that Marina Oswald wasn't put on to Lee Oswald to spy on him, to see what his motives were, to come back to America and report back about our inner workings, and the way of life over here, and the way we did things, and all that jazz. Because you remember they called the Soviet Union the Iron Curtain for a reason, because nobody knew what in the hell was going on over there, because very little got out. It was very hard to get any information in and out of Russia back during the Cold War, the height of the Cold War. Reliable information. We were so worried about double agents, triple agents, you know, whose loyalty lies with who, and who better to send over there but an unwitting, hapless defector who thought he was doing something for his country. I mean, you don't just go from, you know, growing up here. Sure, you might want to get away from your mother, but you also want to follow in the steps of your brothers whom you highly admire and want to be like. His two older brothers went into the armed services. You know, Robert went into the Marines, did his time and got out. Oswald was in the Marines. Seemingly, you know, of course he might have had his moments here or there while in the Marine Corps, but, you know, who doesn't? You know, when you're on leave with a bunch of guys and there might have been a gun involved, or you get a little too drunk or things of this nature, you know, things happen. But people also keep an eye on you. They also know what you're into, what you do, what your interests are. And given his position in the Marine Corps, you know, he wasn't just some dummy. I mean, they gave him a radar operator position at Atsugi, which was a CIA military base. He had to have a clearance to be there. You know, so obviously they saw something in this guy. And they could have approached him and said, hey, we need you to do this for your country. You know, his departure from the Marine Corps was highly expedited. And then once he got back to Texas, within 3 days, he's on his way to New Orleans and on a freighter to make his way finally to Helsinki to defect to the USSR. You know, how does that happen? How do you go from being in the Marine Corps and serving your country proudly to like, okay, screw this, I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm going to lie about my mother being hurt. I'm going to hightail it back, and I'm going to get out of the country as fast as possible and head to Russia. Nobody does that. Nobody. I don't care who you are. Nobody. Unless you're told to. The CIA is scared to death to release any files about any of their operational programs, such as false defectors. You know, it speaks to, you know, how things are done, how they did things, why they did things that they did. You know, their means and procedures. They don't want to let that stuff out there. You know, there's, you know, in the time since, of course, there's been things suspected of false defector programs such as Operation Red Sox, Operation Red Cap, things of this nature. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that these things were going on as a viable option, as a way to get intelligence directly from the source in Russia and then get them back out of Russia. Because what are you going to do? You're going to create a international scene from a defector who wants to go back to his own country? You can't keep him there. You can't keep them there. You know, you have to let them come back, or else there's going to be an international incident. Same thing would have happened here. You know, if somebody defects to this country and then wants to go back, you let them. That's just the way it was. So they found a loophole. They could get somebody in there under seemingly false pretenses and then get them back out, gather the intelligence they needed. And the Russians weren't stupid. They knew all this was going on. They probably knew from the second Webster and Oswald shows up over there. They knew what the gig was. Okay? And that's why they treated them the way they did and acquiesced to them the way they did, but didn't really let them see anything, didn't tell them anything. You know, and do we know for sure whether Oswald or Webster gave them anything? We don't know. But it seems pretty odd that, you know, while Lee Oswald is there, the U-2 plane gets shot down and disrupts peace talks. between Russia and the United States. You know, when Oswald has intimate knowledge of the flights of the U-2 and how high it flies and where it flies and all that jazz. They just didn't think the Russians were capable of shooting a rocket that high up and being able to knock one out of the sky, even if they knew it was there. They were like, well, what are you going to do about it? You know, it was an international incident back then. Here's proof, you know, that the United States is spying on the Soviet Union using technology. Not a good look for us. So, you know, do I think that Marina Oswald, being a Russian spy, had anything to do with the Kennedy assassination? Probably not. I mean, it wasn't like she talked Lee Oswald into doing this. I mean, what's the point? Really, what is the point? You know, if it ever could be tracked back, you know, and this is why I think a big deal was not made out of Marina Oswald back then, is because of her being in obvious ties to the Soviet Union. You know, if it was implicated in any way that the Soviet Union or Cuba or anybody foreign had anything to do with the Kennedy assassination, people would have demanded a reaction. But instead, we get this lone nut assassin who was working with no one, just this crazy dude who decided one day that he'd had enough out of life and that he was going to take out the president, who just happened to be going by his work one day. And because he wanted to be somebody, because he was a nobody and he wanted to be somebody, you know. So to this day, we don't know where the truth lies. It's been muddied all these years by theories and whatnot. I mean, you know, I remember back in the early 80s when Marino sided with Michael Eddowes, who thought that the Russians had sent back a fake Lee Harvey Oswald imposter, and they had him exhumed on national television. You know, and it was found that no, the body, in fact, in the grave is Lee Harvey Oswald's, the real Lee Harvey Oswald's. Crazy things like this have gone on throughout the years, where Marina has been pressured into answering certain questions. You know, she claims she took the backyard photos, but it wasn't her camera. Then she claims to not have taken the photos, or taken the photos, but it wasn't at the Elsbeth house because the stairs are wrong. You know, and that she maintains that Lee Harvey Oswald did it, you know, in the years after the assassination, and then in the 80s and 90s, she came to believe that he didn't do it, and she's still of the belief that he did not do it, you know, even up to now. But she hasn't really been an advocate for truth. You know, she gets on any kind of media, she tells her story, but she doesn't ask to come with the whole truth. So, that's what we need right now, is the whole truth, Marina. And if this podcast ever reaches your ears, just know that there are still folks out here who want to know the truth. And if you can still remember it out of everything that's been muddied over the years, there's people out here that really want to hear it. You know, I know various researchers that have had good relations with Marina. I know researchers that have had a bad relationship with Marina. That she won't answer certain things, won't talk about certain things. Very nasty, very short. Other ones seem to have a great relationship with her. You know, she's been very reclusive for the past 25 years. You know, we only saw the pictures from when she went to Walmart, you know, 5 years ago. Didn't say anything, though. Didn't come out for the 50th. Hasn't been seen or heard from since. But she's still alive, and she can still provide us with the real truth of the Kennedy assassination. and the real truth of Lee Harvey Oswald and the real truth of Marina Prusakova. So please let the truth shine through. That's it for this show, folks. For more, head over to MidnightRiderNews.com for all of our free archives. I'm telling you, there's a lot of good shows over there. Feel free to check them out. And again, I am Rob Clark from the Lone Gunman Podcast, which you can find on iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere that plays podcasts. You can probably find my show. And there is about 150 of them in the archives. If you're interested, you can hear more shows like this there for free, just for you. That's it for this quarter. See you in another quarter. Good night.